Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Last Honest Realtor podcast. I'm your host, David Fleming. Thank you so much for joining me here today as we now find ourselves about a month into the fall market, or by the time this podcast airs, it'll be about 5 weeks. And I thought today, topics people are interested in, well, there's so much happening in the world, specifically in our economy. We talk about interest rates, we talk about unemployment and inflation. I had lunch with Ben Rabideau yesterday, my friend and noted economist, North Cove Advisors and Edge Analytics, and he had a lot to say about the economy. We met with some folks that are in the mortgage market, some folks that are in the debt recovery market, and some insolvency trustees, some financiers in from the United States looking at the Canadian economy. And then I thought to myself, you know what? This is a real estate podcast, not an economics podcast. And we called it the Last Honest Realtor. So today, folks, what I want to do is I want to just simply tell stories. Stories from the trenches, if you will. Stories that I find on their own, well, might be interesting, but collectively will explain the inner workings and the behind-the-scenes action of the Toronto real estate market. Like I said, it's not an economics podcast. I love talking about all those wonderful things, and we could surmise what is going to happen in the Canadian economy, the real estate market trajectory over the next 12 months. But today, let's tell some stories. They're the fun ones. They're the ones that make you laugh, or in some cases make you cry. I mean, what can you glean from the fact that, I don't know, I had a client's house for sale and an agent walked in their living room during dinner? That's a good one. So the early returns, the observations, I think we're going to get the TREB stats maybe the end of this week, early next week, and we'll see what's happening with average home price, what's happening with supply. Folks, I've mentioned this in a previous podcast, but the prices this year are somewhat stagnant. And over the course of, let's say, the last few months, we've held at this 5% year-over-year drop. And by stagnant, I mean, no, they're down. But listen to this. January over January, the average home price was up 1.4%. Down 2.2% in Feb, down 2.5% in March. Now, 4.2% in April, 3.8% in May. And here's where we get into this, as I say, stagnant. Down 5.2% in June, down 5% in July, and down 4.9% in August. So I expect that the September average home price, when it's released, will probably come in around that mark, year over year, down somewhere between 4.7 and 5.2%. And that is what I mean by stagnant. Now, a friend of mine had an interesting quip the other day. She said, you get excited every fall. The market starts hot for a week, and then it just kind of goes limp. Is the same thing happening this year? Now, the early returns, in my opinion, if I were to pick a couple of quips about this market, I would say we are lacking consistency and predictability. And that is the problem. And what I have noticed is that try as you might to identify any sort of patterns, you think you've got a pulse on the market, and you figured out a certain price point or a housing style or a geographic area, something will happen to throw you off. And what I mean by that is that you see a red hot listing, it gets a ton of offers and a lot of action overnight, it gets a great price, and then the next week that really great other property doesn't. And that is the story of this market, a lack of consistency and predictability. So instead of telling one long story or looking at one topic or theme, as I've said today, we're going to collectively tell a bunch of stories. I picked 10 of them to talk about the market. Now, my first story, and here's where some of you are going to say, wait a minute, why are you talking about your painter? Just hear me out here. Sometimes the market indicators can be found outside of the market, and it starts very simply with the fact that my painter texted me and said, do you have any upcoming jobs? She's got nothing. Now, that is fascinating to me. Why? Because in July and August, she was working 7 days a week, and I had to beg her to move things around for my listings. Now, what is the takeaway from that? Here's my theory, guys. My painter telling me that she has no upcoming jobs, and then I'm looking at our business, and I'm saying, we listed 20 properties in September. We were run off our feet all through July and August. Our painter, our stager, all of our contractors, we were going outside. You know, we have our chosen people, right? We have our painter, we have our stager, we have our contractor, we have our electrician, we have our flooring guy, we have our chosen people. And everyone was so busy, we started to look for alternatives. We have the one place that we used to move, the one place that we look to store. Our storage locker's full. So point is, I look now and I say, okay, we've got a couple condos coming up. We've got a couple houses. They're not till November. We listed 20 properties in September, and now we've got this sort of, hey, nothing's happening. My painter has no work. My stager I spoke to, and she said she's not filling her days. She used to do 2 staging a day. Now she's saying, hey, we got Thursday and Friday open. So the story is this, folks. If you're looking for a moral, Is it possible that everyone rushed to get to market in September and then there's going to be nothing in October or November? Like I said, sometimes you have to look outside of the industry to understand what's happening inside of it. And I'm not trying to, shape this narrative, but I am looking at the folks that we work with that are very near and dear to us to help us get properties ready throughout July and August to get listed. 20 properties, as I said, for September, and now there's this sort of lull. So the theory is we are going to see massive inventory numbers in September, and then as we get into October and November, I believe, as the pattern has shown us here, that inventory is going to fall off, and most of the new listings, and Trev doesn't have a stat for this, they used to, it was called relistings, and they stopped giving it to us, which really sucks, but there's probably an ulterior motive there. I think that the relistings are going to be massive. I think relistings are going to be like 40%. Now, a second story here. I'm going to call this one out to lunch. I don't go out to lunch. It's kind of a waste of time. I eat at my desk. I get 4 minutes to watch some YouTube clip. What did Gordon Gekko say in Wall Street? Lunch? What are you kidding me? Lunch is for wimps. I should put that on a t-shirt. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a BlogTO article. Now, first of all, BlogTO. That's where you want to get your hard-hitting news from, right? Especially about real estate. It took me a couple of years to resist the temptation to completely slog BlogTO, which I did on my blog, which is Toronto Realty blog, and I understand the irony of a blog slogging a blog. But the point is, this is a website that caters to like broken, angry Gen Z and millennials. All of their real estate coverage, the headlines, and I did a full blog post on this. I compared them to the National Enquirer. Every real estate headline is like, no one buying real estate anymore, market crashes. Not a single property ever sold in a million years, ever. And the comments are just out of this world. So, with that introduction, right, like they have food critics and travel bloggers writing about real estate, they put this house up for $499. It's the cheapest house in Toronto for $499. And what's fascinating is that we have an agent in our office. I'm not going to name names. We'll call this person Dan. We have an agent that actually brought an offer on this. So this is fascinating. This is not a house. This is land value. $499. It's a 20 by 55 foot piece of land. It is tenanted. There are like 30 people living in this house. So first of all, in case you're not aware, you can't get tenants out of a house. You just can't. That's the province that we live in. And if I elaborate on that, I'll get one of those comments that's like, I find some of your commentary to be rude. Yes, you can't get people out, even if they don't pay their rent. They just live there forever. So these people are not going to leave. But this house is a complete teardown, and it's $499. This is an unmitigated disaster, which the BlogTO article didn't say. I'm going to hit on the most ridiculous comment they made at the end of this. Now, Dan told me this house should be condemned. He said there's a heavy lien. He said the foundation's bowed out. The floor joists have fallen off the original foundation. They did a quick fix trying to support the floor at some point with wooden posts, which were secured into the ground. So then you've got wood soil contact, and the wood rotted. So then they tried to do another fix, and they stacked cinder blocks. Dan said to me, quote, the house is going to fall over and kill somebody. Now, Dan has a client who's looking to buy this in cash. It's land. It's $900,000 to build a new house, and that's like a retail price. The average person probably costs $1 million, $1.1 million. Now, this house needs to be vacant. It needs to be torn down. It is not a house. But Dan said his spidey sense started tingling when he called the agent. And the agent said, well, 3-bedroom houses in this area sell for, $900,000 to $1 million. And Dan said, but this isn't a 3-bedroom house. This is land. It just happens to have what used to be a house on it that now has 18 people living inside, and they're never going to leave. So believe it or not, Dan has a client. And Dan looks at this and the client says, it's going to cost me $900,000 to build a house. I get this for $450,000. I'm in for $135,000. It's worth $160,000. Now, you're not doing this if you're not profiting. I know a certain part of society believes that we shouldn't be entitled to profits. Why would anyone want that? That's crazy. Down with capitalism. But the point is, Dan's client has decided, okay, I'm going to put an offer in for $450,000. Now, there's a small wrinkle here. You can't get a mortgage on this because it's not a house. It's land. There are people living in it, but it's not a house. The banks know this isn't a house. So Dan's client makes an offer for $450,000. There's 6 offers, by the way. And you might say, well, David, in the past, I've heard you rant about people offering under list when you've got 5, 6 offers on an offer date. This is not that. There are probably people offering $1 on this. Now, communication with the agent was questionable. In fact, Dan never heard back from the agent after submitting an offer, and didn't hear back the next day. Dan had to track the agent down, and the agent said, "We're not going to look at any of the offers. I don't think." They relisted for $950,000. It's worth $450,000. Now, BlogTO's article says, once you're done, you could own a home worth anywhere from $1 million to $2 million. That's some really great real estate analysis there, BlogTO. $1 million to $2 million. Wow. I mean, geez, you really narrowed it down. I mean, you could build a house that could be worth $1 million, or it could be worth twice that. Wow. That might be one of the dumbest things I've ever read in BlogTO, and that's a long list. Now, my third story. Okay, I'm going to call this one The Math Doesn't Add Up. This is a fun one. I'm really going to slag agents today. A friend of mine says she shows a condo. It's listed for $699. It's been in the market for 92 days. Doesn't like it. Maybe because it's a condo. I don't know. We're in that market. She gets an email from the agent that has the address of the property, and it says, price reduction. And I kid you not, it says, we are very happy to announce that we have reduced the price to $788,000. It was listed for $699. So my friend, who's kind of like me, she wants to pick at the scab, right? She has no interest in this, but she has to know. So she calls the agent and she says, I don't understand. Is that a typo? You have reduced the price from $699 to $788. What am I missing? And the agent says, well, they were never going to accept $699. And she said, what? Well, they were never going to take $699. They wanted $850. Right, but this wasn't $699 with an offer date 6 days after listing advertised on MLS. This was $699. You're on the market for 92 days. Yeah, but they wanted $850. Now they're at $788. Mic drop, price reduction. This is what we're dealing with out there, folks. Now, my fourth story. Define motivated. Now, you see this a lot, motivated seller. So first I'll say this. If you list a condo for sale, low with an offer date, and you say motivated seller, this is like saying, I'm going to quit drinking as you're literally just finishing the bottom of the bottle of vodka. But we're seeing this a lot. What I will say is that the word motivated has made quite an appearance in MLS. Listen to this. There are 52,989 listings on MLS. Now, that's not Toronto. That's everywhere. I found 1,115 listings with the word motivated. So that's 2.1%. Now, 2.1% might not sound like a lot. 1,115 listings use the word motivated. And that's just in the brokerage remarks. I didn't search client remarks. 643 are freehold and 472 are condo. But here's what's really cool. If you look in the city of Toronto, there are 384 listings that use the word motivated. 99 are freehold and 283 are condo. So see how that flips? Now, maybe it's just because there's more condos in the 416 or higher proportion for sale. But what I would say is, theoretically, more condo sellers are motivated. Now, that was fascinating to me, and I'm going to continue to monitor the use of the word motivated. One of the things that I think is really interesting about motivated is that, look, a property is worth what someone's willing to pay for it. But if you see a listing for a $500,000 condo, let's say, and like the same unit 2 floors lower is up for $449, not selling, how do you say you're motivated? Because you're obviously overpriced. $449, 2 floors below, you're at $500. You're wickedly overpriced. And you've put the word motivated. So maybe it's just meaningless. Okay, story number 5. This backwards rental market that we have. Now, I've talked a lot about this on Toronto Realty blog. There's this idea that tenants should somehow be pre-approved. And what I mean by that is there's a process. You see a listing, you book a showing, you view the property, You put together an offer with your supporting documentation. That is your credit check, your employment letter, your pay stubs, your rental application, your driver's license, and you send that to the listing agent, and the listing agent reviews it with the landlord. Over the last few years, and I've written about this a lot on Toronto Realty blog, what I'm seeing is that realtors will email you and say, attached are my client's supporting documents. Please review them and let me know if you'd consider leasing to them. First of all, no. That's not how it works. That's not my job. Second of all, why? Why are you not submitting an offer? A lot of these people haven't even shown the property. So I chalk this up to the laziness of realtors, in my opinion. But I would also say that I can't do what they're asking because I'm constantly afraid of being accused of discrimination. You know, and I wrote this on Toronto Realty blog too. There's a thing called financial discrimination, which is crazy. Like theoretically, and I love hyperbole, someone wants to rent this condo, but they're unemployed and they don't have an income. And I say, hey, you can't afford the payments. Financial discrimination. It's the world we live in 2025. But I did write a Toronto Realty blog. There's a Charter of Rights and Freedoms and a lot of other legislation. One of these pieces of legislation says that you can't use ratios to approve tenants. Really? GDS and TDS ratios? Hello? How much is the rent? Multiply by 12 and divide it by your salary. We've been doing this since the dawn of time, and apparently this isn't allowed. So point is, when someone emails me and says, can you please look at my client's documents and let me know if the landlord would consider them? First of all, I can't speak for the landlord. Second of all, it's not my property. I'm not reviewing it and making a decision. And thirdly, I don't want to be accused of discrimination. So I have this listing down in, I won't say where. Sidebar, the keys went missing. This is another thing that happens a lot. The realtors listening to this podcast, they understand. When a key goes missing, someone says, hey, there's no key in the lockbox. You trace it back. Who was the previous realtor? Who was before that? And eventually you hone in on one or two realtors. You know it was one of them. No one's ever admitted it in the history of real estate, except for me. Once I did, and that agent gave me SHIT, and I thought, okay, serves me right for being a nice guy. But the point is, you're running around downtown, and you've got keys all over the place. Agents show 8 properties. You go home after a long day, or if you're a typical real estate agent, at 1:30 in the afternoon to do Pilates or catch up with a friend. And then you empty your pockets and there's a key and you have no idea what condo it's from, so you throw it in the garbage. Or you do, and then you sneak back in the middle of the night and put it back. That's what I'm hoping happens here. So that's the sidebar. So I get this email. Okay, ready for this? Where is it? Here we go. So blah, blah about the clients, right? Because I really care. And also they can't afford this place because one of them, here's where people say you're rude in the comments section, but you know, like one of them makes $30,000 annually in hospitality, so that's less than minimum wage. They can't afford it based on GDS and TDS ratio, which of course is discriminatory. But here's the part, ready? Given their strong profile, we'd appreciate it if you could review the attached documents and let us know if you'd be open to receiving a formal lease offer. What's formal about a lease offer? That's what you do. That's the job. That's how you secure a rental. You submit an offer. We have this generation of real estate agents, and I'm not going to say generation like they're all younger, but you know, for the most part, I always look the agent up. I'm like, oh, classic, a bartender / real estate agent, right? Or got out of that business into this one. And a formal lease offer? Can you imagine if we did this with resales? Hey, here's my client's profile. Would you be open to a formal offer? Yeah, that's how it works. I couldn't believe it. And on this listing, I've received 9 emails asking for me to pre-approve the tenants. Let us know if we should book a showing. You haven't even shown it yet? Everything is backwards. This is a microcosm of the world we live in where everything is backwards. And the irony is, the first couple of these that I got, I don't know. I was going to say maybe I was driving and I was bored. It's kind of funny because you're not supposed to be on your phone. I should also stop watching Netflix while driving. Yes, so while I had this listing, the very first 2 that came in, I actually did look at them and I was like, yeah, hey, Jimmy, sure, cool, they look great. Happy to review an offer. Radio silence. This is what's happening in the rental market. So if you're a tenant and your agent says, hey, why don't we just email 14 different real estate agents and ask them to pre-approve you, and then if they respond, we'll book a viewing on the property? No. That's not how it works. I'm absolutely fascinated. A formal offer. It's such an oxymoron. There's nothing formal about it. It's just how it works. Now, story number 6. Can a sale be too good? Listen to this one. I've got a listing. It's nice. It's underpriced. We've got an offer date. It's in an area where action is happening. A colleague of mine has a similar property. Now, this colleague has an offer date on Monday, and I have an offer date on Tuesday. So this house is listed at 1,699. And my colleague gets 11 offers on his listing, and it sells for $2.2 million. So we're like the next day, right? We're like, oh, wow, this area is exploding. But what if that price was too good? It never occurred to me. Now, 1,699, let's say they sold for $2 million. I think we would have been better off. But the fact that this sold for 2.2 soured the buyer pool. The next night, we got 4 offers. Hey, you know what? That's pretty good. But I started to talk to some of the other buyer agents, ones that showed the property. And I heard it 4 or 5 times. My clients were really scared off by that sale from last night. Okay, but that's not us. Well, they're really scared off by that. That's a big number. But we're this house and we have offers today. No, and they kept going back to it. And so the funny thing is, or not so funny, but if you were to draw back to 2021, 2022, when the market's ripping and you're a buyer, you're so used to the process and the emotional trauma that it's normalized. You make an offer on Monday and you lose. Wednesday, you make another offer and you lose. The following Tuesday, you make another offer. That's just how it was. And in this market now, what's happening, and I talked to 2 agents that had losing bids. I said that other house got 11 offers. I talked to 2 agents that had losing bids. And one of the guys said to me, that house was listed at 1,699. My clients offered $2,005,000, and they thought they'd blown it out of the park. They thought they were nuts. Their mortgage broker told them this is crazy. It might not appraise. And then it sold for 2.2. They were crushed. They were gutted. They couldn't sleep. They felt sick. They don't have the emotional energy to go and bid on yours tonight. That caught me off guard. Because you think about the market that we're in. Now, the funny thing is, for this particular house, Tara was working the open house, and she said that you get like I call them Becky, right? Karen, I guess is what they go by, but you get Becky comes in and says, an offer date? Really? In this market? And like, she probably can't afford it, and like, I don't know, doesn't live in the area, whatever. It's always the snide people, the people that like live on the street in the area, they're more respectful, but a lot of people, believe it or not, they hate real estate. And the fact that that woman said that tells me that's the sentiment out there among a lot of buyers. Now, we got 4 offers. We sold for $275,000 over the list price, but you had someone walk in and say, an offer date in this market? So you do see that on the one hand. And on the other hand, you've got the buyer pool that just is scraping and clawing to get to a number, and then they get absolutely, completely, totally blown out. So that was fascinating to me. And it reminds me of, there's a house on Westwood. I think this was 2023 or 2024. There's an agent that tells me, we can't bring an offer on yours because we're bringing it on this other house. And they've got offers at 1 o'clock. So he brings an offer at 1 o'clock, and by like 3:30, he's told he's out. I've got offers at my listing at 6. He calls me at like 4:30. He's like, the bank closes at 5. My buyer's rushing over because they've got their deposit, the bank draft. They rush over. That's made out to Royal LePage or Remax or Century 21. They cash it in, and then they get another one made payable to Bosley Toronto Realty Group so they can bid on ours. And they lost. They came second. So imagine being that buyer. You made an offer at 1 o'clock on a house and you lost. You made an offer at 6 o'clock on a house and you lost. That used to happen. And now what I'm seeing here, like I said with this property, is that this sale price for a competing listing was too good. You would love to have what I call a table setter. This property gets offers. It sells for a big number. We come out with our offer date the next day or the day after. And hey, there we go. We ride their coattails, their momentum. And in this case, it seemed like so many of these buyers were just, I can't do it. The ones that offered on that house and lost absolutely couldn't. Some of the other ones were just disenfranchised. Now, story number 7, I call this dinner time. So I have a client who's got a house for sale, clients I should say, and they've got 2 children. Now there's a showing booked from 5:30 to 6, and they have a Ring doorbell like so many of us. Do you ever listen in? Conversation on the front steps. They're like, okay, guys, here's our strategy. We're going to offer this much and they'll sign back. Let's do it. And then the seller's listening on the Ring doorbell. I also wrote about that on TRB. So my sellers are looking through the Ring doorbell, and at 6:15, they call me and they're like, David, the agent never showed up. Now there's a massive fine for no-shows, as there should be. It's very simple. Back in the day, you had to get on your phone and call, hi, I'd like to cancel my showing. Now you just go on the app and you cancel it. So the guy's a no-show, and I said, guys, I am so sorry. That's terrible. I'm really sorry that you had to leave. You know, I'll look into it. I expected that to be it. Guy no-shows. They're having dinner. 7:30. They're in their dining room, and the door opens, and they're scared. They're like, what? The door opens, and they hear a bunch of feet shuffling. And one of them walks out and says, hello? And it's a real estate agent with 2 clients. And the client says, well, our client rather, my client says, can I help you? And the guy looks up, he's like, yeah, we're here for a showing. He seems to be giving her the gears as if it's rhetorical. She says, what time is your showing? And again, he says, I don't know. We're seeing 6 properties. Like it's her fault. Have you noticed a theme here? Accountability. I take a lot of heat for ranting about other real estate agents, but I don't care. So they said, we're in the middle of dinner. This is not appropriate. What time was your showing? He says, I don't know. She says, what's your name? He says, Bob Smith. She looks on her phone. She says, your showing was from 5:30 to 6. It's 7:30. This is the part where you say, I'm so sorry. You probably get down on your hands and knees and beg for forgiveness because there's a big RICO fine and you're just a complete, you know what. Instead, he looks at her and he says, do you have any idea how much traffic there is out there and what it's like to have back to back to back to back to back showings? And she says, get out of my house. So she calls me and I said, listen, I am happy to file a RICO complaint, but there's a caveat. Can you guys guess what that is? You probably won't. The caveat is your house is for sale. You want that guy to come back and show it because you want the clients to buy it. And I explained that to them and they were like, yeah, doesn't that suck? It's one thing for someone to literally trespass, because it is trespassing, folks. There's no excuse for it. I've been in this business for 21 years. I've never had a showing from 5:30 to 6 and then just randomly show up at 7:35. That is trespassing. And it's a vulnerable feeling. But then to think to yourself, I can't do anything about it because I'm really hoping this guy books a showing and brings the clients back and they make an offer and buy the house, that really sucks. Now, my 8th story here, I'm going to call this Dichotomy. This was kind of neat. So this business is 24/7. You know, it's 365. It's all day. It's every day. And, you know, I'm husband, father, right? I might be out doing something and, I got to take this. It's a phone call or I've got an offer. I'm at my mother's one day. I like to go to my mother's on Sunday, right? It's a very classic traditional family value thing, right? Sunday dinner. And I'm at my mother's on Sunday and I sell 2 properties. So here's the dichotomy. The first property that I sell is a condo that I've had on the market for 5 months. And I've reduced it 4 times. The second property I sell is a house I've had on the market for 2 days. And I get 2 offers and it sells unconditionally and over the list price. Now, on its own, that might not sound like the most interesting story. You wanted to know what we had for dinner at Mom's. But it underscores the dichotomy out there. And dare I say that on the very same day, this was a busy day, on the very same day, I did 2 leases. I still do leases. I don't know why. I just, because I'm crazy and I'm an addict. I did 2 leases. The first is a property that's been on the market for 3 months. We've had 6 applications. 2 of them were fraudulent. I told that story in the previous podcast. And the other ones the landlord just didn't want to work with. So been on the market for months and we finally lease it. The other unit was on the market for less than 24 hours. So this is what I'm saying, guys, the dichotomy out there. So the first example, you can say, well, David, you had a condo and you reduced it 4 times, you sold it after 5 months, and the second one you had a freehold. Yeah, maybe it's not a dichotomy. Maybe that's 2 different market segments. But it's pretty interesting. Reduce, 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 sell for way under list. And the other one is, oh my gosh, right away we get multiple offers and sell over list. But the other one, hey, listen, they're 2 condos. Now one was a 2-bed plus den 2 bath, and the other was a 1 bed, 1 bath. So if you want to, you can poke holes in that argument and say it's not a dichotomy. But what I would say is that I have trademarked this word over the last couple of years. The market is spotty. And what I mean by that, as I have said earlier, there's no consistency, there's no predictability out there. And every time you feel like you've got it figured out, something happens to completely buck the trend or blow away your theory. The market is incredibly spotty. You see incidents of positivity over here, negativity over here, great sale here, poor sale there. You don't know which end is up. And I have listings. I think we're down to, Lindsay was saying, great news, guys, we're down to 16 listings. And that's not that bad or good, because we're not complaining. We love our clients. We do business. But the point is, you're supposed to move them. Some of my friends, and I won't name names because maybe they don't want to be, but I have a colleague, I think he's got 35 downtown listings. That's wild. And so, your job is obviously to list and to sell. And when you do that, you think you have a pretty good idea of what's going to be popular and what's not. The other part of this story in dichotomy is that we've got a couple of listings that we brought out in September, thought they'd go like that, and they haven't. And then we had a couple of listings. We call them dogs, and that comes from the pre-construction world, the dog units, as they say, which I'm going to go off on a tangent, so unlike David. Then they used to have like the VIP first day sales. They would always sell the dog units. The one that overlooks the alleyway, the one next to the elevator, the one next to the garbage chute, right? You take the people that think they're special and you sell them the crap, the dog units. That's a pre-construction term from the early 2000s. But we would have, some of these dog listings. We sold a couple of dog listings, and some of our good stuff is sitting. The dichotomy and the spottiness of the market. Now, story number 9, I call this one the entryway, the gateway, if you will. I've noticed a trend that I want to talk about. On the one side of the argument is I'm saying in this market, the polished product does really well. I've always said that. If you have an A+, the cream rises to the top. But let's talk about the beater in an amazing area. I have noticed this trend. People are willing to pick up the entry level, the gateway, if you will, that needs a ton of work just to get into that prestigious area that they would otherwise be unable to get into. So we had a listing earlier this fall. It was $4 million in a luxury area. That is the cheapest you're going to find for this house. This house needed some work. It wasn't fully original, but it probably hadn't been touched since 2000. And there were some quirks, and there were some mechanical things that needed to be fixed. I wouldn't say structural, but at $4 million, it sounds like a heck of a lot of money, and don't get me wrong, guys, it is. But on either sides of this house, 8 million and 8 million, I'd say 8 to 9, roughly. So 4 million is pretty good for this. Now, what happened was we had somebody that came in right off, and we had a ton of showings. But the guys that came in and bought this house, they maxed out. And they're going to do what? The proverbial coat of paint. So if you can get into this area at this entry-level price point and you say, I'm just going to get in and we'll do it slowly over time. This is a massive trend. Now, I've got another client. Oh, actually, there's 2 I want to talk about. So these guys are, this is amazing. I'm getting ahead of myself here because I went to visit them and they were just living life, swimming in the pool in the summer. They did it, right? They got into an area that there's no way they're able to afford. On a street, there's no way they're able to afford. By buying, I don't want to say the worst house in the area, but let's say that this was 2.3 million. And it's a detached on a wide lot, on an amazing street, on a deep lot, but it's an original footprint. Everything else on this street has been torn down and built new for $4 or $5 million. Or you've done an extension and that extension house is probably 3.5 mil. These guys go and buy this house for 2.3, original footprint, and it's basically the same size as their semi in East York, but they're in the area. And yes, I showed a house on their street, and I went over and I was like knocking on the door, and I heard some music and some kids, and I heard some water, and I thought, wow, what the heck? So I opened their gate and I just walked around. They are living life, man. They're swimming in the pool. It's like, 5:30 on a Tuesday. And I'm looking at that. They're like, oh, dude, we love it. This is amazing. You know what? They'll put an extension on that house in 2 years, 3 years, right? They'll spend $1 million, maybe in 4 years or 5 years. But right now, they're on the street, which is one of the best streets in Toronto. They're in the neighborhood. They're in the school district. They can literally spit to the park. Spitting distance, can we just say throw a ball? And they maxed out to get there, but they didn't have any budget left to do anything else. My last story here, I sold in a similar area to clients for $2.4 million for a house that would have been $3 million if it weren't so beat up. This was a house that was tenanted. It was an absolute nightmare. I'm not even gonna get into it, but it was tenanted. It went through litigation. This house was destroyed, and you had to buy it in as is, where is condition. But guess what? The structure's fine. The mechanicals are fine. This house was built new in 2006, so there's no knob and tube wiring or clay pipes or asbestos or lead pipes. I mean, yeah, there's holes in the wall. And I don't even want to know what that fluid was, okay? Like, it could have been blood. I have no idea. Do you know in the movie Psycho in 1960, the blood scene, they used chocolate because it was filmed in black and white? Sorry, I was just going into, Leonardo DiCaprio Inception there. Don't know where I was going with that. But the point is, I talked to my clients, and one of them was like, did they spill chocolate sauce all over? And I was like, I think that could be a large pool of blood. Got me thinking about Psycho. So I don't know, but to underscore how bad this house was, yeah, that was just one of the things that we saw. But for $2.4 million, it would have been $3 million otherwise. And guess what? Entry level. So these guys did a little more than the coat of paint, okay? They got rid of the blood/chocolate sauce, and they probably spent, I don't know, 70 grand. I'm not going to say that's not a lot of money, but how far does that go? But they're in the area. So the entryway, this is one of the trends that I'm seeing right now. As I said, we always think that the best stuff is that's what's going to sell. But when you're on the buy side, buy the worst house on the street is what they often say. The trend is that people are forgoing the nice finishes and the renovated spaces and that polish in order to get into an area or on a street or into a school district that they'd never be able to get into otherwise. Now, my last story, number 10 here. If I can't sell it, I'll lease it. And this is a trend that started last year. And I thought of this because I just released a property for clients. They listed their condo for sale in early 2024. We didn't even have an offer. So it wasn't a question of like, can we sell this? Now, they were going to lose substantial money based on, and they didn't buy it through me, but they were going to lose money because they think they bought it in 2021 as an investment. And rates have gone up. They said, you know what, we'll keep it and we'll lease it for a year. Guess what? Tenants decide to leave, comes up for lease in August, and they're like, well, the condo market's actually worse, so we'll keep it and we'll lease it for another year. I have had 4 clients this year list their condos for sale and turn around and lease them. And all 4 of them were previously tenanted. So think about that. You go from, I've got a tenant in my property and I don't want to be in this space anymore. My tenant has left, or in one of these cases, they financially incentivize them. Then you put it on the market and you see how tough it is to sell. And then you say, you know what, I'm going to go back to that investment of being a landlord and carrying the property because I can't sell it. That is fascinating to me. So when you look at the inventory and you say from the rental side of things, there's a lot of rentals in the market. And this will be a blog if you're interested. Quarterly, I read about the rental market, and the Treb stats should be up within a few days. So at some point in the first 2 weeks of October, if you want to check Toronto Realty blog, I will have an update on the rental market. But what I saw in the last couple of months was that rental listings, condo listings in C1 and C8 are at an all-time high, and they are just obliterating the records. Now, of course, units leased are at an all-time high as well. It's not like we're seeing 5,000 rentals come up per month and only 1,000 are renting. The absorption rate is in line, or actually in some respects higher than last year. But I think a lot of that inventory in the rental market is from folks that want to sell their condos but can't, or just won't take the prevailing price. So if I can't sell it, I'll lease it. that has been the theme in the condo market. Well, one of the themes in the condo market in 2025. So guys, if you want to look at all 10 of these stories, I still go back to what I said at the beginning. Early returns. It's a stagnant market. It's an unpredictable market. There's no consistency. The market is spotty. One of the trends from these stories is that, yeah, agents are not exactly helping out there. But we're in what? The 3.5 to 4 year cycle after the market peak. February of 2022 is when our market peaked. I mentioned I had lunch with some economists and industry experts, and we're kind of looking at next spring and saying, okay, February, which isn't that far away, it'll have been 4 years since the peak. Now, average market cycles are usually 5 to 7 years. But of course, in Toronto, we had a market cycle that was 20 years of just going up. So the question is, when do we get that relief? When do we see a sort of change in the proverbial winds blowing or whatever you want to call it? We're going to get one more interest rate cut this year, maybe two. I personally believe that part of the reason why the younger or entry-level folks aren't entering the market, it's not affordability, it's fear. I covered this in a previous podcast where I talked about if the one kid who's 25 wants to go buy a condo and everyone around him's like, oh, dude, you shouldn't. Might be a bit of spite and jealousy. But until those folks enter the market, we're not going to see that uptick. And from there, the fallout is the condos have to be moving for those folks to be able to sell and move the $1.1 million houses. And those houses need to have some uplift for those folks to be able to move up to the 2.5 and so on and so forth. So I think the fall market is going to continue to be a little bit stagnant. I think when the numbers come out next week, if you want to look on Toronto Realty blog, I can put some actual data to that. And who knows, maybe 2 weeks from here, we will meet again and talk about exactly that. Market stats. God, who doesn't love that? If that doesn't get your motor running, I don't know what does. So folks, thank you as always for watching. If you're on YouTube, feel free to drop me a comment, even if it's to say that I'm rude or whatever people have been saying lately. If you're listening, please remember to like, comment, or subscribe if it's on Apple Music or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And as I always say, thank you so much for watching, listening here on The Last Honest Realtor.